Ciechanover es un científico que ha participado en un descubrimiento muy importante en la medicina relacionado con el mecanismo triturador de basura dentro de las células. Para entender su significado, pensemos en lo que sucede en nuestra calle cuando no pasa por más de 3 semanas el camión de la basura. La acumulación de los desperdicios crea focos de infección y desorden. Lo mismo pasa en el cuerpo si la máquina trituradora de basura no funciona a nivel celular. Actuar en ese estrato abre posibilidades de nuevos medicamentos contra varios tipos de leucemias y enfermedades. El profesor Ciechanover es clave en una gran revolución en el entendimiento del delicado equilibrio en el cuerpo humano que permite hoy una medicina personalizada. El problema es que este enfoque diferenciado no le interesa necesariamente a las compañías farmacéuticas. Es más eficaz, pero menos rentable. Hoy conversaremos con Aaron Ciechanover sobre los problemas éticos a los que se enfrenta una revolución médica, una revolución que está en las fronteras de la medicina, que permite una mayor precisión en el diagnóstico y tratamiento de enfermedades. El problema latente es el de un Big Brother médico que podría decidir con base en nuestros perfiles de enfermedades posibles, no las actuales, por ejemplo, si nos van a contratar o no. Se abre así una discusión muy importante de cómo vamos a enfrentar con humanidad estos nuevos escenarios. Lo que queda claro, más que nada, es que Aaron Ciechanover es un ser humano lleno de compasión en los mejores moldes de la tradición médica, que sabe que las revoluciones en las fronteras de la medicina no lo son del todo, si no son para todos. Esto nos confronta con dilemas éticos que son especialmente relevantes en estos tiempos de pandemia, en los problemas de distribución de vacunas y en los problemas de desinformación en las diferentes crisis que estamos viviendo. Bienvenido, Aaron Ciechanover, al ALEPH, el Festival de Ciencia y Arte de la UNAM.
Thank you, Pepe.
Let's talk about some of the ethical issues arised by the pandemic, such as vaccination.
Well, the issue of vaccination is critically important because this is the only weapon, the only efficient weapon that we have at hand to defeat the disease. But, you know, there are no free lunches with this wonderful achievement of science. And now we know that the vaccinations are working. The Israeli experience is magnificent. Basically, we are now completely free. The country is completely open. We are back to normal life. The hospitals are basically empty from corona patients, and we are living a normal life, all due to the vaccination. But there is a price for the lunch, and the price is not only a dollar price, but also an ethical price. And there are several issues that are related to vaccination. One, of course, is the price of the vaccines. Not all countries can have it. So is it only medicine for the rich people, or should the rich country help the poor country who cannot afford having it, helping them with providing them vaccinations? Then there is an issue within the countries of priority. The vaccines, we don't have enough vaccines for everybody in each country. Whom do we vaccinate first? Pregnant women, young people, old people, people that vaccinating them is not going to help them because they're already fatally ill with other diseases and so on and so forth. So prioritization is another issue. Then there is an issue of people who refuse to get vaccinated. And these people are endangering other people by infecting them. Actually, you might argue that they are selfish, because if enough people around them are vaccinated, then they are protected, but they are not protected because they did contribute to the community. They are protected because other people contributed to the community. So here comes a very important question of whether a country can enforce anybody to his body to be touched, to be jabbed by the vaccine, like a country can draft you to the military. In Israel, we all have to go to the military. So what is the force that a country can apply on people in order to secure public health, security, other issues. What are the relationship between a country and its citizens? If you have rights in the country, you must also have obligation. So you see that the issue of vaccination is a complicated one ethics-wise, as there are several issues around it that all need to be discussed, and having, I don't know whether black and white decisions, but some politics implemented.
What happened for worse and for better in this pandemic regarding these questions? And regarding what we're doing?
You know, actually, we don't know. And let me tell you, let's start with countries, with vaccination. So, you know, it's not enough to have enough injections. You have also to have an infrastructure of the health system in order to vaccinate the people. You need to have public clinic, you have to have nurses, you have to have physicians to treat side effects and so on, and so forth. So countries that are lacking infrastructure of public health system are, of course, suffering. And I think that, unfortunately, the best example is your neighbor from the north, called the United States of America. It turned out to be completely fragmented, 51 states, each independent, each has its own system, nobody talks to nobody, and they have enough money to buy all the vaccines in the world. They just don't have the way to vaccinate the people, and as they are still fighting for it, they are doing okay. I wouldn't say that they are doing wonderfully, but so we don't know. And other countries are, you know, somewhere in between. It all depends. England is doing a little bit better. Italy is doing less good. You can tell me about what's going on in Mexico and in South America. How good is the distribution of the system? So we don't know. Another issue is, of course, buying the vaccines. The vaccines are made by pharma companies, and pharma companies are not churches. They're not synagogues. They're not charity organizations. They're money-making organizations, and you need to pay for each vaccine that you buy. And we don't know what happened to poor countries that couldn't afford it. One thing we know, that other countries are using it politically in order to gain control. So countries like Russia that have their own vaccine, the Sputnik 5, or China that have the Sinovac, are trying to get advantage, and rightly so. Why not? If they can have influence on countries by providing them help, that's absolutely legitimate. The only issue with the Russian and the Chinese vaccines, that they have not been tested according to the Western strict standards. So we really don't know how efficient they are, whether they work against asymptomatic disease, severe disease, and so on. But we see that vaccines are serving countries in order to gain a political power, which is justified. You know, it's better than gaining it by war and by killing people. Better to get it by helping countries. So this is one issue. The other issue, as we talked, is about what I call people who refuse to get vaccines. And that's really severe, because people it's coming with another issue that we are going to talk about, which is misinformation and fake news and disinformation, that the vaccines are going to kill you, and it's better to get corona than to get the vaccine, and so on and so forth. And here, the issue is very severe, because these people are lacking education in science. Because if they would have understood not only the advantage of the vaccine, but how simple is the vaccine, at least of Pfizer and Moderna, which is going back decades in science, it just accumulated all the knowledge in science in order to make the vaccines. You know, in Israel, by the way, that we used Pfizer, we didn't have one single severe side effect. Nothing, zero. And these people are making other people frightened. The fact that you don't want to get a vaccine, it may be okay. But the fact that you are using the social networks that basically made a disservice to the purpose is wrong, because by using Facebook and Twitter and all the other social media, you are distributing the fake news, and you are influencing millions of people worldwide not to take the vaccine by feeding them with the wrong information. So, and then people believe in it because they are not scientists. And in this case, I think there is a much more complicated role first for the social network to block it and to filter it, but they are fighting the issue of freedom of speech versus damage. So here, where is the balance between the two? And for governments to take care of educating people and explaining them what's going on, that the vaccine is so simple, that there is nothing there. It's actually the culmination of science. It's the biggest victory of science. So fighting the people who refuse to take vaccine is very complicated, because it's not enough that you come to some kind of a consensus or guidelines. You need to reach to the hearts of millions of people that are using this little machine that is called cell phone and are connecting to all the world to get all the kinds of bad news.
This is infodemic, no? This is infodemic.
Exactly.
Not just the biological virus, but also information virus. That means an infodemic.
And the problem with infodemic, that it's also run by celebrities. I can give you two names that you probably know very well. One of them is the previous president of the United States, who advertised the chlorine to Clorox to treat COVID-19, who advertised hydroxychloroquine as if he was an expert physician, actually against the advice of his chief physician, who is superb, Anthony Fauci. And then Madonna, who told people that the whole issue about the vaccination is a whole conspiracy, and so on and so forth. So, who am I, a Nobel laureate, that will explain people versus Madonna that have tens or if not hundreds of millions of followers and is busy half day long on tweeting and Facebooking to all her followers. So you see, when such people are so influential, so one person can cause an unbelievable damage to millions and millions of people. So the issue of vaccination here is much more touchy and much more complicated to handle than other issues that we have discussed.
And there is also the disinformation that comes from science. For example, Andrew Wakefield,
yes, exactly.
that the vaccines have to do with autism.
Yeah, but this is where, luckily, let me just allude a little bit of what you just said, so it will be clear to our audience. Andrew Wakefield is a British physician. Actually, he's a doctor, a certified doctor, a graduate of a famous British medical school. And he came one day with an idea that vaccination, not against COVID-19, but against MMR, against measles, mumps, and rubella, causes autism. Can you imagine that mothers all over the world, not only in the UK, are hearing that if they will vaccinate their kids against measles, mumps, and rubella, which is a triple vaccine, the child is going to suffer from autism. Immediately, the vaccination programs in many countries stopped. And he published books that became a bookseller. It was unbelievable. It was a bookseller, and people read it like eating a meal after starving for 30 days. And it took billions of dollars and years to refute it. People have to do clinical trials in order to convince the public that it's all lie, that has no roots in reality, that the vaccine doesn't cause any autism, that the ingredients in which the vaccine is dissolved in the bottle doesn't have it. Took billions of people, and at the end, not only that, can you imagine how many children and adults died of mumps and how many got the disease because they didn't take the shot? Was amazing. And then he published it also in a professional medical journal, in Lancet, which is one of the leading periodicals in the world. It's a British periodical, and then Lancet has to withdraw it and to announce in the BBC and all the British networks that this is all blah, 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 blah. But the damage has been done. And I can give you another example that we haven't talked about. There was a rumor in Japan that vaccination for girls against uterine cervical carcinoma caused by the human papillomavirus is causing movement disorder to the children, to these girls. So the program of vaccinating in Japan for a human papillomavirus induced cancer of the of the cervix of the uterus stopped until again, it took years and billions of dollars to show that it's all wrong. And meanwhile, 30,000 Japanese women got unvaccinated, got cancer. 5,000 of them are already in Japanese cemeteries. Can you imagine the price that one person can cause the damage more than a war between countries, more than the tsunami in Fukushima has caused? It's unbelievable. And that's again because of the social networks and the communication that we are devices that we are using nowadays.
Fighting these infodemics must have a dimension of knowledge against ignorance and also compassion. And I sense the fascination that you have with all these modern vaccines. Let's talk a little bit about the RNA vaccines and how it's important to communicate what they are all about in order to fight this ignorance.
Yeah, let me, before explaining it, because it's very simple, say something about the ignorance. The ignorance is much, it's not only ignorance, I think that it's worse than ignorance. It's our inability to concentrate and to hold a book, a reliable book in our hands. Libraries are empty these days. People don't go to books. They want the news to be short, sexy, flashy, and leave me alone. The only book is the cell phone. That's what people want. Let's tweet, let Facebook. They don't have tools. They have ignored one of the most important tools that human beings have ever had. And that's the ability to think, to be judges, to be critical, to ask themselves, do you tell me the truth? Or shall I go and verify it? Shall I go to the library? Shall I hold a reliable source? Shall I go to the book to find out whether you are lying to me? We take for granted that whatever you tell me is correct, and then it becomes my property, and then I believe in it, and I keep on running. The will to make shortcuts has become a huge danger to our well-being as people. It's unbelievable because it's not just the ignorance, it's a new culture. It's really a new culture. We destroyed our internal world as people. Because think about it, people have two different worlds. They have the external world, of course, me talking to you, but at the same time, I have my own internal world. I'm thinking about this and about that, what are my experiences today, and so on and so forth. But now we destroyed completely our internal world, our ability to think, our ability to judge, our ability to be critical, because we are under avalanche of information coming from the outside. So it's much more complicated than that. But let's go to your question about RNA vaccine. It's very simple. Actually, it's much less complicated even than the vaccination against polio. In order to make an antibody or any protein in the body, you need to have a genetic information. And the genetic information in our body go from a DNA to an RNA to the protein. So that's the flow of information. Here, scientists even jumped over the DNA. There is no DNA at all. We don't touch the genome. We don't change your genome. We don't mutate anything. We don't touch anything that your mother and your father inherited to you. Nothing or whatsoever. We are going to the upper ladder, to the RNA, and we put the RNA in little vesicles. The RNA, you inject it into your upper arm, to your arm. The RNA within 5 minutes goes into cells, start to make the spike protein of the virus. 5 to 10 minutes or 15 minutes maybe, there is no RNA anymore. It's gone. It was destroyed. The spike protein is being made, coming out of the cell and stimulate the immune system to make antibodies. We don't inject a virus even, not to say a DNA. We inject RNA, a piece of RNA that is making only one protein of the virus, the protein that enables the virus to penetrate into your cell and to make it sick. Once the antibody attaches to this protein in the virus, it blocks it, and the virus is dying because it cannot go into the cell, it cannot replicate, it cannot multiply. It's so simple. And even if people didn't understand what I told them, all what they have to do is to look at countries that have immunized their people. It is working. For me, it's the ultimate victory of science. And
Yes.
therefore, science for me is my pilot in life. That's it. This is the pilot that navigates me all my life. It's working. It is working.
You know, this is very interesting because it gives us the brilliance of science, the new approaches and the new knowledge that has come that lets us have these opportunities to develop such vaccines. This has to do with a revolution in the understanding of the cells, of the deep understanding of the cells in which you specialize.
Right. And people should remember also history. You know, looking back, we are, when you think of life from 30,000 feet, we are a thin layer. I came to the world in a few years, I will leave the world, and we are all building on the shoulders of giants that preceded us. And then probably the young generation is building on our shoulders, and so on and so forth. Remember, polio was a plague, was an epidemic. There is no polio. Few cases in Pakistan, in Syria, we defeated it. Think about mumps, think about rubella, think about bubonic fever. Think about all these diseases that millions and millions, think even about flu, the 1918 Spanish flu that killed millions of people. Now we are vaccinating and there are cases, some people are dying, but basically the disease is defeated. I remember myself, this is not an old Greek history, certainly not an old Mayan history. But when I was a kid in the 50s, there was polio. My parents shivered to death that I will contract polio. I had a neighbor that is still alive that got paralyzed. Most of the people did not get paralyzed, but she got paralyzed out of it. And then came the magic vaccine of Salk and Sabin, and I got it. And that's it, and polio was gone. So just learn history. This is not a new vaccine against COVID, it's just another vaccine that is much safer, made with a much better methods, but our own history, people that are still walking among us, like myself, have enjoyed all their life from being vaccinated against polio, against mumps, against measles, against rubella, against all these diseases. It is working. So people just should open their eyes, not to say reading books and reading the history of, I think that if you ask me what is the biggest achievements of medicine in the 20th century, I would say two: vaccines and antibiotics. There are many others like insulin and so on. I don't want to diminish, other major, but if you're asking me about achievements that saved the lives of millions of people all around the world, antibiotics and vaccines, no doubt about it.
And the knowledge of science has also to cope with other problems that are looming there, such as climate change. Let's talk about the other problems that we are not seeing because of the blindness, maybe the ignorance, maybe this thing that you are saying about we want to digest information very quickly and we don't like to see what is there. What are the problems that are there?
I'm not a climate change expert, but I clearly understand what's going on. Emission of greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide, deforestation, which cause holes in the ozone, heating, warming of the planet, acidification of the oceans, huge disaster. We are basically destroying the planet that we are living on. The issue with climate change is really very complicated because two interfering forces are working here against us. One is religious, the other one is money. The combination of the two is a killer. Let's talk about religious. People say, basically maybe the people that are afraid of the money are using the religious as a tool to promote the movement against it, against treatment and handling climate change. People say like, how can it be that the climate is changing? It's God. God is not going to harm us. God is our shepherd. We are the flock of God. So why God should hit the planet that is ultimate creation and hurt his people? So it cannot be. And they deny it completely. They simply say, don't touch it because it doesn't exist. You don't touch things that don't exist. Then come the issue of money, which is very dangerous because we have to move to green industry, to cleaner energy sources. But that is killing, current industry, the contaminating industry, the fossil oil industry, which contaminate, and that has to do a lot with rich people that are holding the industry, and they have to make huge investment. And therefore, when you are talking about the Paris Agreement and the Kyoto Agreement about reducing emission of greenhouse gases, countries say, it will take us decades to do it because we need to replace. And here comes again the issue of whether the rich country want to help the poorer country in order to change all their systems. But one thing is clear. COVID, I can tell you, Pepe, COVID is going to be defeated. We know how to do it. If we shall not going to cooperate on climate change, there will be no planet. Our children may have it, but our grandchildren and grandchildren are not going to have it. So it doesn't take a sabbatical. The solution is very difficult to even start with because of this rejection that coming from different sources, from the industrialized country that are using the religious establishment and so on and so forth. If we are not, this is, I would say, the biggest threat on earth nowadays. And unfortunately, during the pandemic, which is already more than a year old, this subject has completely forgotten. It has been pushed away from our agenda, and we added another year of doing nothing in order to solve it.
Yes, we have this ethics and dilemma, this dilemma in ethics nowadays, and we have to identify the problems we have. And let's go now to explore ethics that doesn't belong only to COVID. Ethics and medicine beyond COVID-19. Let's talk about the biological revolution, that you're a key figure in that.
Yeah, of course, COVID-19 is one segment of the ethical issue that we became busy with, but ethical issues in medicine have always bothered us. We didn't have to go to the modern revolution in medicine. I'll bring you just one example about, for example, euthanasia. Can we kill people out of mercy because they are having a fatal disease that cannot be cured? Can we, as human beings, kill another human being just because he doesn't have or she do not have hope? It's a very tricky question because, the issue of somebody that doesn't have a hope cannot be a slippery slope. The German people thought that mentally retarded people don't have a hope, and they kill them non-discriminately. So the issue of who is a healthy contributor to society and who is not should have a very sharp red line. And the sharp red line, at least according to the Jewish tradition, is no, no, no. God gave us life, whoever God is, let's don't discuss who is God, and God will take our lives. Because otherwise, we are really on a slippery slope. So, this issue has been with us forever. Can we help people dying? I'm not judgmental here. I brought one example from Judaism, but it's still an open question. But let's go to modern medicine. So I just wanted to emphasize to our audience that this is not something new. It has been, I can bring you many other examples about about ethical issues that have been existed with medicine for generations. But I think that modern medicine brings with it on its wings new and much more complicated challenges. And that's because we are now able to penetrate into the code that make us what we are, and that's the DNA. It was not true until the late 90s, basically. So we are talking something that has been with us for 20 years or so. And now we understand much better mechanisms of disease by being able to read the code. We don't understand it completely. We can read the letters. We understand some of them. We don't understand others. But within the next, foreseeable future, we are going also to understand it. And the code is telling us maybe what we are going to have. Are we going to have cancer? Are we going to have psychiatric diseases? Are we going to have dementia, Alzheimer's diseases? Actually, we are now discovering genes that are prone, that are rendering people susceptible to Alzheimer's. And we can call them by name. We know them. We are developing very sophisticated imaging systems that can tell me whether in 10 years I will have Alzheimer's. Now, the meaning of predicting diseases, either by DNA or by sophisticated imaging or by other modern updated techniques in medicine, has unbelievable implications. So now I'm talking to you, but I don't know what is being cooked in my brain. What's being cooked in my brain now has a huge implication, because maybe my employer would like to know what's being cooked in my brain, because he doesn't want to have an Alzheimer professor running around and being paid salary, and he might decide to fire me. The insurance agent would like to revoke my policy, because until now I paid nicely every year, hundreds of dollars every year for my health insurance. But within a few years, if I'm going to have Alzheimer, I will start to suck back much more than I paid. So he will say, listen, guy, the insurance company is a private insurance. We are not churches. We are not charity organization. From now on, your policy is revoked. The military would like to recruit the best fitting people. They would like to go into genetic information. It may even penetrate into our very personal life. Marriage. Think about falling in love. Even now, let's admit it. We are falling in love within, whether we admit it or not, within circles. We are marrying people from the same religion. Not always, but let's say around the world, more or less. We are marrying people of the same skin color. We don't have to talk about it. We just look at the color. We are marrying people of the same socioeconomic level, more or less. You will not find extreme. You will not find homeless people in the market of Mexico City marrying the princess of I don't know where. So, and we are marrying people of the same education, of similar education. So we are already selective. Let's be honest with ourselves. Why not to marry people that have the appropriate genetic background? So we shall be able to predict how our children will look like. It's just a simple DNA test, costs nothing, doesn't even hurt to take a buccal smear from our inner cheek, and within a few minutes or a few hours, you have a DNA. So it penetrates even to our very personal lives. And that issue is really threatening to shake the very fundamental psychological integrity of what we think should be our life. Or, one issue is, of course, the mixing of science into emotions. For us, we said, there are things that are beyond us. Emotions, love, let's don't touch it. Let's leave it as mysterious as it can be. And here, all of a sudden, we are trying to manipulate it, to look into it, to dissect it, and so on. The other thing that we have never touched is our future. One thing that protects us You know, people tell me, oh, you are living in Israel and now there is a tension with Iran. Maybe they'll bombard you tomorrow with an A-bomb. I say, maybe yes, maybe not. Who knows? You know, I've been here for 70 years. It has been okay. You know, not knowing the future, not knowing that when you are taking an airplane and taking a flight and you might crash over the triangle in the Atlantic Ocean near the Bahamas there, gives you a security. You know, knowing the future is something that we cannot live with. But predicting diseases is knowing the future. We never, we have no tools to handle it. You know, the fact that I don't know what will happen in the next minute gives, you know, keeps my personality intact. Otherwise, we might disintegrate. And I think that this is the really most dangerous points in this revolution, that based on our genetic information, we shall be able to know the future. But on the other hand, we should look at the advantages, of course. The advantages, of course, that we should be able to prevent diseases. If I know what I'm going to have, now I can start to go back to my bench in my laboratory and start to develop drugs and devices in order to prevent the disease. And preventing a disease is much better than treating it. It's better not to get sick rather than to get sick and to treat the disease.
And one of the advantages of this approach, of these developments that are in the frontiers of medicine, is to have personalized medicine.
Exactly.
You talk about a big pajama analogy that is very interesting.
Exactly. We talked about the ethical side. Let's now go to the practical side. And the practical side has huge advantages in it. Because now, let's take cancer, for example. You know, until now, we treated the cancer patient because we didn't know the reason to the disease with very heavy cannons. You know, we shot them with irradiation. We shot them with chemotherapy. They looked horrendously. They felt horrendously. The side effects were horrendous. Now we are able to approach them with a very precise knife. If I know the exact mutation that they have, I can design a drug that will treat the exact mutation. I don't have to shoot a fly on the wall with a cannon. I can just come with a little needle and punch it. So not only that, but now I have techniques in even to correct mutations. I'm able to take the wrong gene, to take out the mistaken part of it, and to implant back the correct part. It's called CRISPR-Cas. Two women that invented the technology just got the Nobel Prize in chemistry a few months ago. Jennifer Doudna, I just got her biography today, and Emmanuel Charpentier. So we are able even to correct it. So the advantages of personalized medicine are huge. What we were talking before are the ethical issues. So we need to understand that medicine, the client of medicine is called human being. And human being is a very complicated creature. So once we are looking at what we are doing physically with personalized medicine, with any medicine, we do need to take into consideration also ethical issues that are related to the structure of the personality, emotions, cultural background, understanding of the surrounding, and so on and so forth. We cannot detach the umbrella that surrounds us from the physical body, because at the end of the day, the two of them are making what we are, human beings.
And you know, what's very interesting also is that we have to take into account the problem of sharing this knowledge, because if maybe there is a revolution in personalized medicine, but if it's not for everyone, what's the purpose of medicine?
Exactly. I think that we talked about sharing indirectly. You know, I'm a physician by education, and for me, medicine has no boundaries, no geographic boundaries, no language boundaries, no religious boundaries, no gender boundaries. We are treating here our enemies that came as terrorists. If they got wounded, it's my obligation, and I'll do it gladly, treating them. And the issue of sharing and equity and equality in medicine is critically important. We cannot let poor people or underprivileged die, even within a country. I'm not talking about poor country. I'm talking even within a country. We cannot afford having underprivileged people that cannot afford suffer from a disease to which there is a drug on the shelf. If there is a drug on the shelf, every human being has the right to enjoy its benefits. So it's a critical issue, and I think that countries need to come much more together rather than separated apart in order to help one another and to help their own citizens to enjoy the achievements of science. Otherwise, what we are doing anyway.
Yes, and what are the steps you're seeing in science that are taking in the right direction in order to do that? Because there must be efforts towards that goal.
It's, you know, Pepe, it's a societal issue. You cannot ask scientists to do both the science and to do the politics of science and the budget of science and the morality of science. I think that it's a societal issue that science is a national and international enterprise. And the achievements of science belong to the people who funded it, the people that contributed to it, whether they funded a lot, whether they funded less so, and whether they couldn't afford funding it. And I think that it's a political, religious, and cultural issue. It's not just the scientists that can carry several different flags, you know, of all the aspects of science. I think that it should be on the agenda of any political party that is running in the election, whether it's the president of Mexico, a candidate, whether it's the prime minister of Israel, the president of the United States. And we now see what the president of the United States is doing. Unlike its predecessor that didn't believe in science at all, the current one is pushing billions of dollars into the scientific machine in order to boost it. And he himself promotes it. It's a much more complicated issue. We need to involve all sections of society, and especially the politicians, that this is critical for our very existence. You know, to get science out of the laboratory is a national problem.
Yes, you know, for science, we need critical thinking, but for doing what you're proposing, that it has a level of social dimension, we need to have empathy. We need to develop empathy. And my final question has to do with that. With the tools that we have in art, I know that you're a very avid reader. How do they sensibilize us exactly for thinking in the other, for really feeling what the other feels? That is called empathy. That is very important in the agenda also.
You picked up out of the all words in the dictionary, probably you picked up the most precious one and the most correct one, which is called empathy, because without empathy, we are not human beings. Probably this is the single characteristics that distinct us from the world of zoology around us. It's empathy to the older, it's empathy to the underprivileged, it's empathy to the poor, it's empathy to the surrounding around us, and without it, our existence is not justified.
Tell me about one of your readings, of the books you're reading, that really takes you into that direction, that let you see the humanity in the other very deeply, that touched you.
You know, there are many examples. You can read the book of Albert Schweitzer. I can give you one example that is fresh in my mind now, because just today I discussed it. It's a little example. Rotary International, you know Rotary International, this big organization of volunteers. In each country they have, which was established at the turn of the previous century by an American called Paul Harris. And they have activities in each country, and in Israel too. And they decided to give me some honorary recognition. Doesn't matter, forget about me. But with me, at the same evening, a physician is going also to get this honorary recognition. And I'm the one that is going to present the people that are getting it. And what did he do? He's a children cardiologist. He's a heart surgeon of children. And every year, he takes his team of surgeons and flying to Africa, to the tribes in the jungle and in the poor countries there, in the poor, he brings in all the children that have cardiac problems. And you know, they cannot speak even because they speak different languages. It's the same religion, not the same color, nothing. And they open an operating theater. They operate those that they can do there on the spot. Those that they cannot do on the spot, they fly back to Israel, bring them to the hospital, operate on them, make them recover, and bring them back to their families. It's the ultimate altruism. There is no money here, no nothing. It's poor society in a different country. It's not even your country. It's not your people. It's not your neighbors. It's not your relatives. It's just people in need that are living 10,000 kilometers away that you'll never met before, and probably you'll never meet in the future. So, you know, this is empathy, isn't it? So this is when, you know, and of course the famous, the Albert Schweitzer and so on. For myself, I think that I came to think about it and talk about it and trying to promote it because we do what we can do. We cannot do what we cannot do. I'm not a heart surgeon, so I'm not going to do heart surgery. Because I learned to see that what we do in the laboratory can impact the lives of millions of people. And, you know, we discovered something, then people, based on our discovery, people developed drugs, and the drugs have saved the lives of millions of people for cancer. And I say, hey, look, see what's going on here. And, but maybe out of them, think about these millions of people that your drug saved. Where they come from? Are they coming from Mali or from Ghana or from Liberia, or are they coming from New York and from Washington or from Paris? Is the drug equally distributed? And then I started to think about globally a little bit about what I'm doing. And, you know, you come to these things from very different perspective and very different directions, and you do what you can. The matter of the fact that both of us are meeting the second time now. The first time we met physically in the hotel in Mexico City a year and a half ago.
Yes.
Tell us that, yes, we are doing something, and we are doing what we do in order to alert people and politicians who might listen to us that there is a problem that needs a solution.
And that we have knowledge, and that it's very important to share this knowledge. Professor Aaron Ciechanover, thank you very much for this talk on the importance of sharing knowledge, of sharing science, and the ethical questions that are key for fighting ignorance and illness. This is the mark of a good old physician, of a good old doctor that cares for patients known and unknown. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pepe, very much, and good luck to Mexico.
Thank you.